Welcome back to Miniature Wargaming Warriors. My name's Ken and I'll be taking you through part 3 of the Stalingrad board build today. If you haven't seen episodes 1 and 2, they're above my head right now. Feel free to check those out and then pop back here afterwards. So what can you expect from part 3? Well, very simply, we're going to be building the board up, so we're actually going to be getting some height on it today. Last episode, if you remember rightly, I went down, so I dug into some trenches. This episode we're going to be going up. I'm going to be using more sculptor mould. I'm also going to be using different techniques with hot wire tools for building the XPS buildings, which are right behind me right now. Got a little surprise, and I haven't seen it yet on YouTube. It might have been done before, but I've got a way of putting my buildings on the board and getting them off and reattaching. Put them on, reattaching. And I think it's quite a clever little idea. People have probably done it before, it's just not on YouTube. I haven't seen it on any board builds like 6x4s or any boards that I've played on. It's quite good for storing your buildings and changing the board up a bit so you haven't got a permanent board. And I will leave that till later in the video, so you're going to have to stay tuned if you want to find out what it is. So without further ado, let's crack on. I'm going to pass over to a time lapse now and I'll do a bit of voiceover work. So I'll see you again at the end of the video. So, doing this time lapse, I really enjoy doing these time lapses for the simple reason of you can see a lot of the stuff that I'm doing. If I was recording this in real time, you know, it takes up hours and things, but I think a really good time lapse can really show how much effort and dedication goes into a board. As you can see at the minute, I've just cut out some shapes just from some old cuts of foam I had. Not going to be using this foam for anything in particular, so it just works perfectly. I'm going to use it to base around my sculptor mould. So instead of using just loads and loads of sculptor mould and building it up, I can put objects underneath. You can use cardboard, you can use whatever you like really, foam, anything. You could even use old chunks of plastic. Just something that you can glue to the board to give the sculptor mould something to adhere to. Helps create the shape, and you'll see all that later on. But at the minute, little hint to what I'm doing. Could be something interesting for removing bits of terrain off. I'll still leave it out there. If you can't work out what it is, I'll tell you in a minute. But it's something that I had an idea with. I thought, why not run with it, see if it works, and give it a go. So let's address the elephant in the room. Yes, I've shaved my hair off. Yes, this is definitely due to the COVID-19 outbreak. My girlfriend could not stand my hair being as long as it was. I didn't mind, but she was cutting it and it was all going superbly well, as I might say. I got very impatient and I said, "Oh, pass me the razor here," and I literally just went straight over my head with it. I think it's starting to suit me a little bit, but I definitely miss my long hair. Right, so throughout this whole board build, I've had the idea of just trying to keep it cheap, trying to keep it practical. Doing little things like getting these boards cut to shape and size. If you notice, I'm not using the hot wire tool the whole time because not everybody has one. I'm using just cutters, so I'm using a Stanley knife or an X-Acto knife if you're in the States. I'm using a hobby saw, really handy for cutting straight lines, very good for that. I'm using a normal pen, the carpenter's T. That thing is very handy for getting proper good right angles. Most of the time I'm just using a hot glue gun for the glue at the moment. Very, very handy. I've never claimed to be the best person to build terrain or to paint miniatures. I just do this whole project and this whole YouTube channel because I really enjoy what YouTube offers the whole community together. It gives me motivation to be able to get stuff done, basically, like this whole board, and comes up with unique new ideas. Like, I would never have thought of using magnets to attach terrain to a board to be able to remove it. I would have just normally put it on a bit of MDF and that would have been it. When my mind gets creative, when I'm thinking about different things, like actually having to sit there and think, oh, how can I make this a little bit easier? How can I make this practical? What would I do? It popped in my head to use magnets. These magnets are from Hobbycraft. It's a hobby store in the UK. You've probably got something very similar in your part of the world. I'll put a link below to what these magnets are. They're basically strips They've got a tacky side one side that sticks down, they've got a magnetic side the other side. So as you can see, I'm carving out the groove of where these magnets are actually going to sit. I'm going to be using hot glue to attach them, even though they've got tackiness, because I want them to stay in place. And then on the actual piece of terrain, the base for it, I'm using 3mm XPS foam that I got from B&Q. I'll put links to that as well and below. Basically, the other side for the B&Q side on the XPS foam, I just use the tackiness. I don't put any hot glue down. I just literally peel the strip off and attach it that way. I will say one thing, when working with certain types of polystyrene, like this is expanded polystyrene, EPS, it's made of the little balls. It can be quite messy to work with. You can get good cuts of it with a hobby knife, and it tends not to boil so much if you don't get a clean cut, so several thin cuts would be better. If you're using the XPS, so the extruded polystyrene, it's much more dense, so you don't get the balls, and it can be a bit more expensive. The extruded polystyrene is a lot cheaper, but you can see here where I messed up, so it's always worth checking. I basically put the tacky side the wrong way up, so instead of having the magnetic side down, I actually put the tacky side on it. So I put tacky to tacky and it doesn't work, so I'm having to rip this up now and redo it. So now I've got it the correct way up. Basically how it works is how I explained earlier. You've got the tacky side one side, then you've got the magnetic strip the other side, and on your actual base of your piece of terrain you put the tacky side up so it's facing the terrain, and then the magnetic on magnetic strip work really well together. So it doesn't hold like you would expect, like massive strong magnet would, so you can remove it quite easily without damaging the board. It holds just enough so it doesn't move when you're playing the game. I literally put the two magnet strips together. I then peel off the actual tacky bit for the XPS side, and then all I do is I line it up to where it's going to go and then pop it down and then rub my hand along the top just so it creates a nice little seal and it's attached really firmly, and then give it a few seconds and then I can lift that off and then it's magnetized. Then there you go, job done. That is now magnetized. So now I've actually got the main bases down for all the terrain. I now can work on actually putting some more sculptor mold all over the board. You can see that I'm covering up all the foam that I had left. I use about 2 kilos worth of sculptor mold, and I only managed to, well, I only needed to use 1 toilet roll. Even in this crisis time, I still only managed to use 1 loo roll. People are probably shunning me right now for that, but I did buy these long before we had this pandemic, and this was all in preparation for that, and I haven't had to buy any extra, so please don't shout at me for that. But you can, if you just look at the board, you can see how it's now coming to life. You know, you've got some height on the board itself, and imagine these mounds with debris, dirt, you know, bricks, everything like that. You've got to start using your mind a little bit. That's what's going to happen in the end. That's, you know, once everything's painted and everything like that, this is just like the skeleton of the board as I would imagine it. I've still got the flesh to do, but I can't wait to get on to actually getting some paint on it, because that's when it really becomes fun. But I really am enjoying doing this, and I just want to take this time to say thank you to everybody that's watching my videos at the moment. If you made it this far through, I really appreciate it. You can check out our Facebook group, links to that's below. I've got a Patreon page, feel free to check that out. The Facebook group's just exploded over the last couple of weeks. We've got like 130 people now, whereas we had like 30 before. Really good to see the community coming together. And as always, please, if you feel like it, subscribe. There's plenty of great hobby channels out there to get you through this pandemic. Make sure to check out everyone's videos. Everybody's putting loads of stuff up at the moment because everyone seems to be working from home apart from me, because I'm still a key worker. Luckily I've got 2 weeks off, so that's why all this is getting done. I'm now moving on to building the terrain and the buildings for this board itself. This has been a long time coming, really excited about doing this. So I'm using 10mm and 6mm XPS foam. Some of the buildings like the factory are going to be 10mm and the tenement blocks are going to be 6mm XPS. I'm going to just be doing in this episode the main frame of the actual building, and I'm not doing any of the interior work or anything like that. If you see on the left hand side here, I've got a finished actual product, so I've done a piece all the way through just to see if I was happy with the results, and obviously I'm very happy with how it's turned out. But I'm using all different types of tools for this, so I'm using a hot wire tool, I'm also using, you know, the hobby saw, I'm using a metal ruler, and to texture all of the actual XPS foam, I've used a couple of things. So you can see right now that I'm using a ball of tin foil, so scrape it up in a ball. I found actually further on in the video that if I actually make it into like a rolling pin sort of shape and roll it that way, it's a lot easier than just actually using a ball. I'm also using from Green Stuff World, they've got texture terrain rolling pins, so I use a brick one for like some of the factory work. You can see I'm using a hot wire tool to create the windows, and I've got a template, and that's actually from shiftinlands.com. I've got like a few accessories for the Proxon hot wire table and one of these templates. I thought, oh, that'd be handy for doing windows and doing doors, so that's what I've used. To be fair, it is quite handy. The template itself for doing actual windows and doors is very, very useful, and using a metal ruler to get it all lined up. Save a bit of time. Once I've actually done the templates, I get the two pieces of foam, so these two back and front pieces of XPS, I put them together, and then I just use the hot wire tool to do both at the same time. Be very careful with this because you can catch your fingers, that I've done once or twice, and it is quite hot and it does hurt, so just be very, very careful. What I'm doing with this stuff. Right, so now this is some 10mm XPS foam, and you can see with the roller from Green Stuff World, I'm just literally running it across. I have to put a moderate amount of pressure on there, but if you can see how detailed and how nice that actually looks, I think it looks absolutely fantastic. It works even better with a 6mm XPS foam because obviously it's thinner. You don't have to put as much force into the actual rolling pin to actually get the texture to come out a lot nicer. I'm really happy with the brickwork, and it saves me doing individual bricks, especially over a massive project like this. And here is the finished product from part 3. I'm really happy with how everything's turned out. Everything's starting to come together slowly but surely. We've still got the railway line to put down. It's not a problem. Obviously I haven't got those parts right now, but I'm sure I can source them somehow. I'm really loving how all the buildings are coming together. I've got the battle damage all done, ready to go. You can see I've got the trenches getting ready to come up, so with certain parts of the terrain I'm going to be building onto those. Thanks very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, share and like and comment on this video. If you can put a comment down below, really appreciate it. I'm going to let you enjoy this B-roll footage, and I'll see you again in part 4.